Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today, I have a guest that I am very excited to showcase here on the channel. Now, just a little bit of context to this. When I first met this author, I was blown away by the story, and I was constantly begging for them. I want to have you on my channel. I want to have you on my channel. And we finally got around to setting a date, and I was super excited to have this guest on this show today, right now, for you all. Now, here's a little bit of background about today's guest. He is an Egyptian German author based in Munich, Germany. He was born and raised in Cairo, Egypt, and he has always had a passion for storytelling, fueled by his hobbies, which include writing, diving into captivating stories in all their forms, traveling, and learning about geography and history. Now, I have had the honor of reviewing and reading his debut novel, Treasures of Egypt, on the channel a few months before. And honestly, that was probably my favorite story to read thus far. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a first timer here on the channel, author Amr Saleh. Amir, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. So before we dive into Treasures of Egypt, is there anything else you'd like to add about your background as an author, your love for storytelling, sort of like your desire for creating this incredible novel? And instantly, what was your aha moment for being an author?
Yeah, so I think my aha moment came when I was like a child, which I know it's a bit cliche, but I grew up in the early 2000s, and I was one of the lucky kids who had like a TV in my room. I was also 7 years older than my brother, so I had my own TV and my own room for a while. And basically, that's all when my first stories were written when I was a child. And then as I grew older, I wanted to write more and more stories. And then the pandemic happened, COVID
Yes.
2020. And I just needed something to do. I didn't have anything to, because in Germany, we had, our lockdown was a lot stricter, I think, than in the US.
Mm.
So I wasn't allowed to see anyone. I wasn't allowed to go out after 9 p.m., for example. Like, it was really brutal. So I needed something to do. And during that time, I read The Wheel of Time for the first time. And when I finished it, I thought, yeah, I need to write something like this. I need to give it a try. And just finished the last book and then started writing myself. Wrote my first story, was awful. And then started writing Treasures of Egypt, and I was in Egypt.
Nice. And for those who have not seen my video or even seen my review, what can you tell us about Treasures of Egypt? What is the story about, and what do you hope to go forward with this series?
So the story of Treasures of Egypt doesn't follow a pharaoh or a king or a god. It just follows two ancient Egyptian misfits who, through sheer stupidity, puts all of Egypt in danger. And they are in a race against time to try to save Egypt, even though they are both raised to hate each other. And the story is basically they need to steal a divine weapon from the god of destruction, which, as you do.
Yeah, of course. I mean, how else are you going to save Egypt? And I don't want to give too many spoilers for of this book, my viewers and listeners, because this was an incredible story with great characters, great twists and turns, an excellent climax, and just I learned so much more about Egyptian history, culture, and its people at that time than I've ever learned in my studies as an historian. So, Amir, thank you so much for that. And when you were crafting Treasures of Egypt, what was sort of the promise you're making, not just to yourself, but to your future readers who would pick up this book?
Yeah, so it's a fantasy at the end of the day. So I was promising them the fantasy that they wanted to read, but I also wanted to show them a different Egypt than the one they are used to. Like, I wanted to feel a little different because we were focusing more on the everyday people, actually, not like I said before, the kings or the gods or like the typical view of ancient Egypt. That's just the pharaoh, and then the country is basically empty.
Right.
And that's what I promised the reader, actually, that they are going to see a
Awesome.
unique or a different way of looking at ancient Egypt.
Awesome. And, as I said before, this was an incredible world. Like, it really brought ancient Egypt to the forefront because you don't typically see a lot of books that talk about ancient Egypt. I mean, there may be books that are like, again, treasure hunting books, but they more focus on modern Egypt, and the ancient history is more of like a plot element, like, oh, a cursed um item was taken from a famous pharaoh's tomb that would release some unknown plague or something like that. But we really don't see a lot of stories talking about Egyptian history and Egyptian culture. And yes, to your point, Amir, it is a fantasy story. Like, first and foremost, it is a fantasy story. But I would argue, at least my opinion, it's an historical fantasy novel because it does reference a lot of historical characters in Egyptian history, especially ancient Egypt history. So it is very important to discuss that. And when crafting this story from its initial inception, from the drafts, and then to the revisions, and then to the final draft with the cover, what was the initial feedback like from readers, from reviewers, from friends and family? And from their response, did it validate your promise that you set out from the beginning?
So this can be divided into crafting the story and then the early reader response, which I'm getting now.
Okay.
So the story with the main problem with this one was, like you said, it's a historical story as well, and main problem was with it was that it read like a history lesson sometimes because
Mm,
I need to explain so much history, but the story still needs to happen. So it was just
right.
like pressing the button. Okay, now we're going to stop the story. I'm going to explain something, and that's mostly where most of the revisions and editing went. And now the early reviews I'm getting, people are saying like it feels organic. They getting the story like they are being introduced to the gods, for example, in an organic way. They understand history, who are the Egyptians, who are the Hyksos, and that was very important for me because I didn't want it to be boring. Uh, so right now the early reviews have been really positive, and I'm really glad about it.
Awesome. And I just gotta say, I love how you bring to the forefront pretty much a majority of the Egyptian pantheon to the forefront of the story. Like, I know for general audience, we think of Ra, Set, Horus, Osiris, Anubis,
Mhm.
um, a lot of the other ones that have been more famous in mainstream in movies or games or so forth. But I do appreciate that you brought some of the other gods in Egyptian mythology to the forefront, especially when it came to, again, I'm not going to try to spoil it, but there are certain periods in the book where different gods come into play, which help the main characters, which I found very, very organic in the sense that, yes, they are helping the story go along, but they're also being true to themselves in the sense of this is how they've been depicted over the centuries. This is how they've been recorded. This is what we know of them from the cults that existed. So I really appreciated that, which I would imagine that came from hours and hours of research, editing, and constantly revising the story, which then leads into another question, Amir. So when you're crafting the story, I imagine long hours, long nights. I do not know if you said from our previous discussions on for Instagram, like how long the story took you from beginning to end. I would imagine definitely a few years to create this story, and then putting it out there, or yeah, presenting it on the digital stage. That voice of imposter syndrome coming into play, saying, "Why are you making the story? No one's going to read it. You're making a fool of yourself." Have you ever had those thoughts of imposter syndrome when you were creating the story? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to tell the story and promote the story, because this story needs to be told and shared with the world?
Yes. So imposter syndrome was not really a problem because uh, my goal was to write a different story about ancient Egypt than anyone else. So whenever I felt like, oh, okay, that's something someone else did, it meant that I'm going the wrong direction. And that kind of helped me along the way. The problem was that I was putting in all that effort and I was thinking sometimes, okay, why am I doing this? No one's going to read this. And the fact that like I had to remind myself why I'm writing this. I wanted to introduce ancient Egypt more from an Egyptian perspective. Like, for example, like you said, there are gods in the story who are not mainstream. But if you watch Moon Knight, for example, who
Right.
is directed by an Egyptian director, you will also see that he's introducing different gods than the ones you're seeing normally in mainstream media, because that's a different perspective on how ancient Egypt functions. Or uh, like I had, for example, some of the characters were either good or evil, and I had to remind myself, no, that's actually wrong. That's more like the normal or the Western version of ancient Egypt. It's more in the gray. With the ancient Egyptians saw everything in the gray. So it was a balance between good and evil, and everyone operates in the middle. So I had to remind myself, for these reasons I had to keep writing, because I wanted this to get out into the world somehow. I don't know how. If this book didn't work out, I'll write the next one, and then in the future maybe I will put it out again and give it another try.
Definitely 100%. And I like that how you brought that up, how you want to transform the Egyptian mythology. Well, maybe not transform, but bring to light a different perspective of the Egyptian mythology that we don't typically see in mainstream media. Like, again, as you said, in mainstream media, especially Western media, we typically categorize it's not just Egyptian gods, but even Greek gods of like who's good and who is evil. But if you look at, the cults and the sources and the history and about them from the people who worship these gods, they're kind of in the gray area. Like some of these gods that we associate as being good are not really, that good. And some of who we associate with being evil, not really evil. There's kind of like the nice ones. Like case in point, Anubis. Anubis we associate with like, okay, he's the ruler of the dead, of the underworld. He's like, supposed to be evil because we think of like Hades and a lot of other figures who are rulers of the dead as being evil. But just like Hades, Anubis actually isn't evil. He's actually probably the kindest person of the Egyptian pantheon. He's probably the one who cares most about his realm. And his story is very, very fascinating, which is again a little teaser into the world of treasures of Egypt. So now going more so into the business side of crafting this story, Amir. So when you finally had the story where you wanted it, you had the cover, you finalized it that this is the best version of this story. Did you want to go the self-publishing route initially, early on from the get-go, or did you want to try your hand at traditional publishing?
No, I wanted to go with traditional publishing, which I worked out at the end because I have found a publisher. But not because there's something wrong with self-publishing. I think it's exactly the same. Like it's valid as well. It's nothing against it. But I know if I want to go the self-publishing route, I need to dedicate way more time to actually sell the stories like a small
Right.
business. And I didn't have the funds all the time for that.
Okay.
And then traditional publishing was actually the only option for me. So I
Ah,
can write the book and then hand it off to the publisher like I did. And then, yeah, of course, there's some marketing that's expected from me. Like I have to work on it, but like I don't have to talk with suppliers, for example, or with bookstores, or
okay.
so. Yeah, exactly. I then work with editors as well and cover designers. Like there's a whole other aspect to it that I don't have to worry about anymore. And I'm generally interested in like the publishing side, like the traditional publishing side of the industry. Like I'm interested in the industry itself. So I want to see how everything works like behind the scenes.
Okay, all right, that's completely fair. And maybe talk us through it. So, how did you go about sort of marketing your book to the traditional publishing world? I don't know if it's the same thing in Europe where there are specific houses that specialize in different genres, where it's like fiction, science fiction, fantasy. I don't know if you have the same things as we do here in the States. So, how did you go about sort of crafting a query letter to attach with your sample of your book to these houses to really say, hey, here's my story, here's who I am. Maybe you want to take a look at that. Can you walk us through the process of that part of your journey?
Okay, so luckily we now live in the age of the internet. So you can live in any place in the world and you can sell a query, like for example in the UK or in the US. Like I did in the UK because they are like 2 hours from here.
All right.
That's also where my publisher is. But at the end of the day, you just write a query letter like everyone else and see. Okay, expect to write a query letter. Even if, like me, you're going to query the publisher directly and not an agent. It's still the same process. You have to write a query letter, a synopsis, and basically try to sell your story. Like before you try to sell your story to an audience, you just have to convince one person. Like, why should you buy my story? And as it happens, that one person either is an agent or an editor at the publishing house. And that's also something I used to tell myself, like if I can't sell it to, can put the effort into one single person, like an agent and an editor,
Right.
I definitely don't have the time or the energy for how many
Mm.
people I can convince later. Yeah, but it doesn't really matter anymore where you live in the world, which is a good thing. Like if you write something in English, for example, you can query someone in the US or in the UK. It's the same process. Because Germany would have been difficult to find someone to publish something in English.
That's 100% true. Like with the age of the internet, it's a lot easier to find, the publishing house that you really want to get into because you can do a little more research on them. So like, okay, these are the books they typically publish. This is what they're looking for. So it allows you a little bit more tools to really fine tune your pitch to them. And hopefully you get the chance to go more in detail with them. So now going more so deeper into the business side of being an author. So as you said that your publishing house kind of like asked you to like do some little bit of the marketing to like spread the word about your book, where it takes place, where people can find it. So for you, when you were speaking with your editor and the people of it, I don't know if you go more in detail or don't break any contracts, but for you, when you went to the traditional publishing world, did they really help you fine tune your audience of who you're writing for? If it's like, the general fiction audience or the fantasy audience of the book world?
Yeah, so it depends on when you like you have from the moment we signed the contract to the day the book is released, there are like phases. And we are now approaching the last phase, which is the last 3 months before release. That's usually when you hear the most from the publisher.
Ah, okay.
But in the last period of time, like last 9 months, for example, it was like general feedback. Yeah, you're doing great. No, that's bad. Need to focus more on a certain thing. Here's a trade review, for example, like one I got last week. Uh, we got you this. Now try spread the word. It's your job. We've done our job. Now it's your job, and that's basically how it goes for like 9 months from the day we have like an actual edited manuscript and the cover. And then the last 3 months, like starting next month, it's the time when like I have a publicist and I can really talk with the publicist a lot.
Ah, okay. So it's like I said, it's a process, like different stages, like in different parts, you're doing this. The next part, you're doing this. So I just said just now, this is like the last stage where you can now talk a little more freely about the book and spread the word on social media. And I think you're probably I want to say the second author that I've had on the show, traditionally published author, who said the exact same thing, that for a traditional publishing house, it's a business and they have their own methods of like how they're going to launch their book and release their book. Now, for you, when you were crafting this story and doing the research into this, did you have any authors that really helped you fine tune your story to really come into your own as an author? And I ask this question because for authors, whether it's traditionally published or self published, if we want to get published in whatever field, it's always good to read the authors in the genre that we're trying to get into to see, okay, what's selling, what type of characters do the readers like, what kind of stories do the readers enjoy. So for you, Amir, what authors really helped you craft the world of Treasures of Egypt as well as your authorial voice?
So I think there are a couple. Like I have a very famous author from Egypt called Naguib Mahfouz. He also won a Nobel Prize for his work, and he had just incredible characters. Like that was his whole thing. Like his characters were so three-dimensional that if a character is silent in the scene and just know that he's in the scene, you will always be thinking about that character. I was so fascinated by how he wrote his characters, and I think that's what I'm aspiring to be like. And I think in more like the American side of things, I think Sanderson is also one I'm very fascinated by. Like I'm really trying to learn from him. I'm trying to learn from his prose, for example. Like it's very tactical. That's
Ah,
what it's not about how flowery the prose is, but rather like does the words on the page actually communicate the story I'm trying to tell as efficiently as possible. And I think that was really helpful because if I didn't try to write like Sanderson or at least learn from him, the story would have been like twice as long.
right.
Yeah.
I,
So it was, yeah.
oh no, I was just gonna say, and also add to that, what else I saw on your social media, which I actually, I think it's like a recent thing you said, which is the happy ending trope. How you understand that some stories have, but not all stories should have a happy ending because, again, I can't say anything for this story, but I like how it doesn't go the way that you expect. And maybe you can actually talk about that when you actually were talking with your publishers. Did they initially, or even like any publishers you may ever trying to connect, did they want you to change your story because they felt if your story was different, it'd be more marketable?
No, I think my publisher knew from from the first chapter. Really, it's a bit yeah old, let's say, because the main character is not your typical protagonist of a story. Like because that's also something that's available on my website. Like everyone can read the first chapter right now, so I think I can talk a bit more freely about this.
Okay.
But it's really deeply flawed human being.
Yes.
Uh, the question is like, the publisher was, of course, worried about, okay, would the reader really follow someone like this? And I think if they didn't have a problem with the first chapter, they wouldn't have a problem with the last one.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'm actually glad that your publisher really said, this story is good as it is, and we're going to publish it, because I definitely think any author that goes in a traditional publishing route, there's always that little fear, is that are they going to completely change the story from what I set out to be? And change is good, but then there's definitely a completely different story altogether, where it's not yours, where it's like, we like the concept, but the execution is not what we're looking for. Change it right now. And that can be very deflating for any new author. But on the off chance, if a publisher does like the story in its whole as its original self, that is always really good, and kind of like relieves some bit of tension that an author may have. And speaking of tensions, that kind of leads into the next business question, which is the reader. Now, we talked a little bit about the audience and how writing for an audience is important, but the reader is, as I will say, is a little bit different from the audience, because your readership is not going to be 100% what you would expect. So, for you, Amir, in your own opinion, has your readership changed, or your initial readership changed from the initial inceptions of the book to now in the last stages, where people are now talking about it? You're getting messages from people who really enjoy the story, are really intrigued by it, and so forth.
No, I think I was like, I've been working 9 months, right? Trying to target like my ideal reader. And luckily the first, like, I have like 20 reviews now on Goodreads, and they give a signal to anyone who wants to read the book, okay, that's what you should expect. And that's why early reviews were very important for me, because I couldn't tell the reader what they expect. Other readers could do it.
Right.
So, like, I would, like, if someone didn't really like the story, I immediately understand, okay, you expected something and you got something completely different, which is fair. It's 100% fair. Uh, yeah, exactly. But I think I'm like, the one thing I'm really proud of in my marketing campaign until now is how I was able to like find that particular reader and target them.
That's really good, because I definitely feel among the many things for any author, is probably the biggest struggle is marketing, whether it's traditional publishing or self-publishing, because how do you market your book as a first-time author? And I definitely think, as like a first-time author, you kind of get blinded by the glitz and glamour of like being an author, which we'll talk in just a few moments about the long-term goal that you set out on this journey, whether it's self-publishing or traditional publishing, which is, did you want to be an author or be known as an author? Because those are two very different mindsets with two very different goals. And I definitely feel, for any author, whatever path they go down, it's easy to get lost in the glitz and glamour and kind of be swayed by your own propaganda of, like, people say like, oh, the story is great, the story is amazing, and yada yada yada. But as one author did tell me, which I think is important to discuss, which is, there's no guarantee that your debut anything is going to be the start of your legacy. Now, I've had a lot of authors who have been the exception to that rule, but I've also had a lot of authors who definitely agree that, for any first time author, we rise, we fall, we come back again, then we fall down hard. And then that voice of imposter syndrome comes back. So for you, Amir, in your opinion, through this process that you're going through, how important is it for any new author to really understand that their debut anything is not going to be the start of their legacy, but it should not deter them from writing if being a storyteller, being a writer and an author is something they are truly passionate about?
I think the best thing I can say is think about this from a more tactical way. Like, uh, if you're the pure author, no one knows you, and everyone's going to come and check your book out. But that means you will find your ideal reader, but you also attract readers who wouldn't like your work. And then when you get out your second book, you'll again the ones who liked your first book will come back and they will bring more people with them. And if you look at any author, like the best-selling authors right now, go check out their original books and you will see that they have way more negative reviews compared
Mm,
to the books they wrote later, because by their fifth or seventh book everyone knows them. Like people know, okay, I like this author, or I just want to avoid them. So it's normal as a review also to have like a mixed reaction, because everyone is coming, everyone wants to know who's this new author right now. I have no idea, I have no expectations. So it's normal to have negative reviews and like mixed reviews in the beginning. That's natural. It just gets better from there.
definitely. And as one other author said on my channel, grit trumps talent. Doesn't matter if you're the best storyteller, doesn't matter if you can create characters that come to life, if you're the best prose writer, etc. Doesn't matter. Because grit will always trump talent, because if you want to be an author, yes, there are a lot of amazing benefits, but there's also a lot of consequences go around for both sides of the self-publishing route and the traditional publishing route. Self-publishing is self-explanatory. That's all on you. Marketing, editing, cover artists, etc. That is all on you. Traditional publishing still the same thing. You have to either write a book in a certain time period or time frame. You have to promote it on different platforms and follow a set schedule. So they all have their own sets of benefits and consequences. Well, not consequences, but hurdles. But if you acknowledge them and you say, I'm still going to do this, then you will definitely be fine, because grit transforms into talent. And that will show in your later works as you progress as an author. Plus, it also helps to have a good community of people who support you and have been your cheerleaders. And speaking of that, let's actually turn to that now, Amir. So, for you, who have been your biggest supporters on this journey of yours? And have you ever gotten a sense of validation from fellow authors that you've met either in person or online?
So I think my biggest supporters were my family, like my parents, my brother, and then like the extended family. Like I was really lucky that I had a family that didn't tell me to stop. They used to read also my stuff as I was writing it, like chapter by chapter. So I almost got like instant feedback from everyone. But my friends as well, they were very supportive of what I was doing. And later, like as I tried to find more writers, like my critique partners, for example, like I've known them for like 2, 3 years now, and they have been also very supportive of my journey. And like when I finally landed the publishing deal, they were like really happy for me, and that's like there's a sense of community that was starting to form with the other writers. And right now, like with my debut group, I have all the other authors who are publishing for the first time this year, and like I was able to meet many incredible people who are also very supportive.
Awesome. That is really incredible, because I definitely feel for all authors, we all want to help one another. We all want to be there for each other and support one another. And I must say, especially on social media and Instagram in particular, there are a lot of authors there promoting their work. Like, for those who are watching this video for the first time, a majority of my authors that I've showcased on the channel in just this year alone have been from Instagram. And honestly, hearing their stories, seeing their growth, there have been authors who have been around, my age, who have now on like their fifth and seventh book. And that's like, holy mackerel. I'm like in awe of their achievement. And it's just really incredible to see, people telling their stories, the stories that they want to tell, and sharing it with so many people. Some people want to share it with others. Some people simply write for themselves and put it out there on the digital stage. And if someone picks it up, That's okay. And if someone doesn't, that is also okay. So before we get into the final question, Amir, so with everything that you've learned and going through in this process of getting Treasures of Egypt out to the world, have you ever stopped to think of how different your life would be if you went a different route, let's say self-publishing, or even if you weren't a writer at all?
Yeah, I think this would have been I would have had more free time for sure. Um, but it's also like it's great for my mental health as well. Like I have learned that during COVID, but it stayed until this day. Like writing is, even if I'm not going to share it with anyone, it's very therapeutic. Like it's
Hmm.
for anyone to try to process the world, especially if you're a fantasy writer. Like that's you can create your own world with its own laws and then try to process what's happening in our real world there. So that's something that I've been doing like since I was a little kid, and I think I just would have continued doing it if I didn't really try to be an author.
Wow. And that kind of leads into the final question of this amazing interview, Amir, which is everything that you've learned and still learning about, the author process, publishing, and everything about this industry. What is your word of wisdom to future authors who want to get their stories out there to people, or even those who are simply just starting off writing?
Um, Other writers are not your competition. That's really important to learn. All writers, published or not published, are in this together. So I know it's hard to get your work out there, but everyone is very supportive of each other. Like you can only learn with the others, and the writing community is probably one of the most supportive communities on the internet, and
Hmm.
that's really something I learned very quickly when I started writing. So try to connect with other people. I know it's difficult, but it's going to help you out, and you're going to meet many incredible people in the publishing community, writing community. I mean, yeah.
I 100% agree, and that's actually how I met you, Mira. That's how I met you on Instagram, and just our conversations, and just learning so much about, Treasures of Egypt and your journey. And you've actually kind of motivated me to do better or more with my character in my book, Michael the Last Angel. My take on Horus, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but he is sort of like a more modern take on the Egyptian god. But now reading Treasures of Egypt, it's now set the tone for me. It's like, okay, now I got to he set the bar pretty high. I know you said not to compete, but honestly, your story and bringing to life the Egyptian pantheon has inspired me to do my own thing and bring the Egyptian pantheon to the forefront in the Michael series in its own unique style, which ultimately I think what you said is absolutely true. Other writers are not your competitors. They will be your biggest critics. They will be your cheerleaders. They will be your hype men. They will be a shoulder to lean on, but they will never ever be your competitors in the sense that you want to beat them and outshine them. There could be friendly little writing challenges and competitions, say like, okay, who can write this in under 2,000 words, and that's fine. That just challenges you to be a better writer or to experiment in different types of storytelling. But it should never be to take someone down, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to support one another and always learning from people, because that's how we grow as authors. And I think this is a perfect ending to this amazing, incredible interview, which again, I'm so excited to have Mr. Amr Saleh on the show and to tell us all about Treasure of Egypt. And I cannot wait for that book to come out. So thank you everyone for joining us for another amazing author interview. Amir, thank you so very much. And before we end, where can people find and engage with you on social media? And where can people pre-order Treasures of Egypt?
Thank you. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Even I started doing that a while ago. And if you want to read the first chapter of Treasures of Egypt right now, actually, you can go on my website. It's amrsalehduat.com. And you can read the first chapter. There are 5 prequel stories there, like written through letters, written in ancient Egyptian style from the characters. You can also read them there. And if you like what you see, you can also pre-order Treasures of Egypt there as well.
I will link all of down below in the description of this video. And if you want to hear me um, read out loud the first chapter of Treasures of Egypt, I will link the video here so you can read it. And honestly, just from that first chapter alone, I loved the world building it set up. It hooked me in 100%. And make sure to pre-order this book. I cannot stress it enough. This is an incredible story. You will not be disappointed. It is great, great characters, great setting, great everything. It sets the world so good, and I cannot wait for. I'm going to ask again. This better have a sequel to it because I'm going to be so mad that it ended right there because it again I don't want to spoil too much, but I just hope that this series continues for many more books to come because this is a game changer. Amir, you have set the bar really high, and you know what? You deserve all the success that comes with it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really happy.
And you're welcome, Amir. So, listeners and viewers, thank you again for joining us today for another author interview. Again, I'll be linking all of the stuff down below in the description of this video, as well as tagging my initial review and reaction of Treasures of Egypt. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And make sure to give Amr Saleh a follow on all social media platforms. And make sure to pre-order a copy of Treasures of Egypt and leave a review on Barnes& Noble and Goodreads and wherever the book is going to be sold. And until next time, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill signing out. And until next time, have a wonderful day.